Lawrence Snell here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, your one-stop shop for elevating your hit business and fueling your passion for high-intensity training. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, please, because this really helps the podcast grow and help more people. And if you're passionate about HIT, you want it in the hands of everyone you care about, right? Get more clients for your high-intensity training business when you download our free anti-aging and strength training sales presentation. You can use this presentation for your next speaking engagement or client seminar to convert more leads and retain more clients. Download now over at highintensitybusiness.com/free. You'll also get access to all of our free HIT business resources, including a short PDF on how to attract great personal trainers, 10 tips to get more clients, and much, much more. So you can download that over at highintensitybusiness.com/free. If you forget that link, you can just go to the website highintensitybusiness.com and you'll see pop-ups for it all over the place. This is episode 412. And the topic of this episode today is how important is supervision during resistance training? I'm joined by Dr. James Fisher. Dr. Fisher is a senior lecturer for the School of Sport and Health and Social Sciences at Southampton Solent University in the UK. He is one of the leading exercise scientists, publishing numerous peer-reviewed articles related to resistance training, health, and fitness. He's been on a podcast many times. I can't believe that actually it was back in episode 370 something when he was last on, which is far too long ago. So James, welcome back to the podcast. Great to be with you again.
Lawrence, thank you very much for having me. I can't believe it's been that long. I thought I was more of a regular than that.
Well, we're going to have to change that, aren't we? But yes, I agree. And good to be with you. And just before we get into this presentation, which I'm really excited about, we're going to go through this research and present the results at the end of this podcast. So please make sure that you listen or watch right through to understand the prior research that James is going to touch on and the study design of this survey we're going to go through, and which will really help you make more sense of the validity of the results as well. So James, let's get started. Oh, and just bear in mind, James, as we go through this, we've got some people watching, but there will be some listening. So we should need to paint a vivid picture for those listening as well.
I'll do an audio description of the slides.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we said we're going to talk about supervision during resistance training, and this was the presentation that I gave at the Resistance Exercise Conference 2023 back in Minnesota in March. And basically the presentation is built around some recent research, but it's starting out by sort of recapping what we've sort of done previously. So in, I think, 2022, we published a paper, The Role of Supervision in Resistance Training, Exploratory Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. And just a bit of a precursor, that was a paper that, if I'm honest, I thought was going to be a bit of an easy win. The idea was to look at some of the outcomes for supervised versus unsupervised strength training. It was in general populations, so it wasn't necessarily in clinical populations. And we were really looking at what's the difference between doing a workout supervised versus unsupervised, not at home versus in a gym or anything else, but specifically with the same equipment, unsupervised versus unsupervised. We had a few key outcomes, and our strength outcome is on the slide there. You can see that there is a small effect size in favor of supervision, but certainly not as large as we'd expected. And our overall effect size is also shown at the bottom there. So what you can see is our graph there. If you're obviously watching, that's great. If you're listening, you can simply see a figure that shows the array of different studies that included supervised versus unsupervised training. You can see the outcome measures, whether it's things like isometric mid-thigh pull, hand grip, bench press, squat, leg press, so on and so forth. And then our next slide is body composition. So we
sorry, James, just one thing back on the last slide. If you just go back a second.
Yeah, of course.
Can you just for those of us who don't necessarily understand how to read these graphs that well, and you said it's a small effect. Can you kind of maybe elaborate on what that really means in terms of effect size for this? Yeah. For this is for strength. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. So effect size is really the overall effect. So we're looking here at the difference between supervised versus unsupervised. If you are looking at the screen, right now, then you'll see a red dotted line. And the red dotted line is basically a zero. If all of the markers that are shown were on that red dotted line, that would show that every study has shown like a zero effect, e.g. there's no effect between supervised and unsupervised training. What we can actually see is, for the most part, most of them are close to that line. Some of them extend quite a lot to the right. And then the final marker at the very bottom down here is on the right-hand side of that red dotted line. That shows that there's an effect size in favor, or that shows that there's an effect in favor of supervision compared to unsupervised training for strength outcomes. Now, the value is here at 0.40, and the confidence intervals are 0.06 to 0.74. So importantly, the confidence intervals don't cross zero. If they cross, basically what that means is, for the population, can we expect this effect carry over to the entire population? If it crosses zero, then we know that for some people, it won't have any effect. It doesn't cross zero. It's always a positive. So we can be pretty confident that the supervision will always have an effect ranging from 0.06 to 0.7 with a mean effect of 0.4. And that's basically the magnitude of change, the magnitude of difference. Now, it's difficult to equate that to say, oh, a 10% increase in strength for supervised compared to unsupervised. It doesn't kind of carry over in that way. But what it does mean is that for strength outcomes, there is a favorable benefit for supervised compared to unsupervised training.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. And then our performance overall. So we looked at a few other performance measures. So we looked at things like vertical jump. We looked at endurance and things like that. Oh, and basically whatever the studies kind of included in those things. And we can see there the effect size shrinks to 0.28, but the confidence intervals are still above zero. So we can still be confident that that is a real effect and that it would carry over to the population.
Got it. Okay.
And if I move on to body composition, we see a much smaller effect size here, so 0.07, and it now crosses the zero threshold. So we would have less confidence that that is a real effect and that it would carry over to all members of the population. But when we look at the variables included on that figure, so body fat, so reduction in body fat percentage, reduction in fat mass, or an increase in fat-free mass, we can start to think, actually, why would body composition or those body composition metrics improve more in supervised compared to unsupervised training? It's quite likely that they realistically just might not improve more by supervised compared to unsupervised training. The notable one on there is increases in fat-free mass. And that one does have a positive effect size, 0.12. It's a very small effect, but it is positive. And it doesn't cross the zero threshold. So we could be confident that that's a real effect for the population. So basically, I guess a lot of this data is showing if you are, or the benefits of engaging in supervised compared to unsupervised training, according to existing literature, is that you probably will improve your strength more than unsupervised, and you probably will increase your muscle mass more than unsupervised, but you probably won't improve any other outcome measures, and you probably won't see body fat reductions any more than you would do in unsupervised training. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. The big thing about all of this is that, as with most good research, it kind of asked more questions than it answered. And so we kind of were like, well, why have we found what we found? This doesn't support what we thought we would find. So what's going on? And one of the key things that came out of all of this is that 9 out of 12 studies had failed to kind of clarify what they even meant by supervision or what the purpose of supervision was. Of the 3 studies that did, I've included the quotes on the screen. I'll read those for people that are just listening. So one author wrote, the duties of the coach were to follow up every strength training session through the 10 weeks, providing technical instructions, training, methodological advice, motivation, and optimal social and mental support. So before I move on to the other 2 quotes, what we started to do was kind of summarize the role of supervision into kind of key categories. And we kind of highlighted that was primarily technical. They mentioned sort of technical instruction and motivational because they said motivation and social support. The next paper, and I quote, personal trainers could spot, secure, and verbally motivate the participants during the weightlifting exercises while forced repetitions were prohibited. So for that, we kind of said, well, this is kind of getting towards increasing effort, improving effort. And it's probably also linked to safety.
Mhm.
And then the final one was participants received real-time encouragement and feedback on exercise technique, with form being adjusted by the certified strength and conditioning specialist if necessary. So again, that was more technical focused. So one of the reasons, as we'll get into the survey in a second, one of the points of all of this was that we were saying, well, hold on, we didn't necessarily see the outcomes we expected for supervised versus unsupervised training. But part of that might be because we haven't really clarified what the role of supervision is in strength training. For some people, they're focusing on technique. For other people, they're focusing on effort, while other people are focusing on safety. Well, if there was a focus on safety, you wouldn't necessarily expect to see greater improvements in body mass, in muscle mass or strength. If there was a focus on technique, that might be geared more towards beginners and less towards advanced trainees or so forth. So we kind of said, actually, this is a whole untapped area that we want to know more about.
And I know you're going to go into this in a moment. Oh, here you go.
And that's what I'm going to go into. Yeah.
If you had, sorry, James, just 1 second. So if you had studies where all these elements you're about to go through were consistently delivered during a training session, you'd have a whole new set of data that are probably far more useful for knowing the effects of supervision. Is that? And I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but just so I understand.
Kind of. I think
Okay.
one of the things we'll sort of get into here is that I think that supervision, and this was highlighted in the survey, differs for different trainers and different trainees. So different trainers will be very focused on certain elements. So for example, people listening to this podcast, high intensity training practitioners are probably very technique focused. Their trainees become very techniques focused as well. They're probably very effort focused as well, but there's probably less emphasis on program design. They
Yeah.
kind of are happy to do the same workout week in, week out with very little variation. They're not so interested in, doing elaborate and wonderful, weird and wonderful exercises. They're probably okay to just get on a chest press and do a chest press and then a leg press and so forth. So program design probably becomes almost, completely redundant in this. So a lot of it kind of depends on maybe the practitioner and the trainee.
Okay.
What we kind of did here is we sort of said, actually, let's break supervision down into 6 characteristics. So, and they're on the screen for those people looking, but for those that aren't watching the video on YouTube, they're listed here as technical. So basically anything that's about correcting or maintaining technique or giving feedback. Effort, so increasing or maintaining effort level to obtain desired adaptations. That might include use of overload techniques. Program design, so designing training programs or workouts, which might include exercise choice, load, progression, etc., etc. Motivational was geared around encouragement to complete a workout. So motivation here is not effort; it's about adherence, and it's about encouragement to complete a workout and promote enjoyment of a workout.
This one made me laugh because I know that the rest of or much of the HIIT industry doesn't like to promote enjoyment of the workouts, even though it's probably pretty important for adherence.
Right. Well, interestingly, most people probably say that they don't enjoy the workout, and
Right.
yet there are characteristics of the workout that they probably enjoy, like the fact that it's brief and the fact that it's infrequent and so forth. So I think there are some characteristics even within that. The next one was accountability, so promoting engagement and adherence. So I often hear my students as trainers and clients as trainees say, "Oh, my trainer makes me accountable. By having a trainer, I know that I'm going to show up and do a workout. If I didn't have them, I probably wouldn't show up." So that's accountability. And then the next one was safety, so spotting or technique correction to prevent injury, handling weights, or so forth. So we kind of had these 6 characteristics that we understood were evident within the body of literature, but we wanted to investigate just to what extent they kind of played a role as far as trainers and trainees perceived.
Right.
So that's the list of the collaborative authors. So
The who's who.
yeah, absolutely. This is a real who's who of research. Eric Helms, Rich Winnett, Jürgen Giesing, Brad Schoenfeld, Dave Smith, a great friend and mentor of mine, James Steele, who everybody will probably know, and Dr. Patroclus Androulakis Kroikakis, so PAC, as most people will know as well, or will have heard of as well. So, this is the real who's who of strength training people. And importantly, this wasn't people that necessarily agree with HIIT philosophy or the supervised training. It was a nice spectrum of people that had their own ideas around what strength training is or what supervision might be. So it was a really nice list. Also, US, UK, Germany, New Zealand. So, a real sort of global approach.
Yeah.
So we ran the survey from April 22 to July 2022, and the aim there was to compare perceptions of supervision between trainers and trainees. So one of the early questions simply asked people, are you employed as a trainer? And then it kind of split them down to answer questions based on their employment. If they worked as a trainer, they were a trainer. If they didn't work as a trainer, they were a trainee. And they asked some questions based on that. And then we had some secondary outcomes to look at things like training experience, set, participant, and comparison based on different supervision types. So there's a few other characteristics in there as well. But it's worth saying this was all, really exploratory. There's really no previous research here to build this on. So it was, this research is not perfect by any standard. And it was really kind of what are people's thoughts? Let's just start to get an idea around all of this. So we have nearly 500 people complete the survey. So if you're listening to this, you probably saw it shared and you might have on it. So if you did so, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We had around 68% male, 32% female, and a real nice of people that were personal trainers or strength coaches or who were trainees. It was pretty much a 50-50, which is quite incredible.
Yeah, that is actually.
Yeah. The average age was 38. So that's nice. It's not sort of just the young ones that, the gym bros, or it's not just older adults who have probably got a bias towards what training might be. And, it's a real nice mix of people. And then, of course, it was global. So that also details on the screen where people were from. Around 68% were from North America, around 23% were from Europe. We listed it by continent. We originally asked the question by country, but in the end, we decided to divide it based on continent. 4% Australia, 4% Asia, and 0.4% South America. So a reasonable split around the world, but certainly predominantly North American and European. And we also asked years of resistance training experience. And again, this was important because people that are new to training might have different perceptions of supervision, or people that have got a lot of training experience, again, would have a different perspective of supervision. So as it shows on the screen, there was around 3.5% of people. So only 16 people had less than a year. Most people had 5 to 10 years. That was 25%, or 10 to 15 years. That was about 17%. And then it kind of spread around a little bit. And then 107 participants had more than 20 years of training experience. That was about 23%. So a lot of people did have a lot of experience. So arguably this was weighted more towards an experienced group of trainers and trainees rather than, newbies, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So the screen now just shows simply kind of the flow diagram through. All participants were asked about their employment, as I said, trainer or trainee. If they were a trainee, they were asked how they typically train, whether it's unsupervised, supervised one-on-one, supervised in a group, or with the training partner. I'm aware there are other ways to train, but they probably aren't aligned with this survey. So some people might do virtual training or might do kind of online coaching, but arguably that's not supervised, it's facilitated. So we decided these were this could accommodate most people, or for our interest, all people we were interested. And then they were routed to the end of the survey to say thank you and so forth. If you're a trainer, you asked for which type of training you did most frequently, whether it was one-on-one, group, or virtual. And then they were asked how they typically train. And again, they had the choice to answer unsupervised, supervised, one-on-one, supervised group, or whether they train with a training partner. So I guess one of the key things that's worth highlighting here is when asked how people train, we want to know the difference between people that are just trainees and people that were trainers, knowing that trainers probably don't always have supervised training, but they might train with a training partner, and that might be to some extent a degree of supervision. So there's kind of an interesting approach with this as well. Okay. Any questions so far? I was really happy.
No, I'm not interrupting because otherwise I derail us. I'm waiting to the towards the end, to be honest, so I can do that with you.
Okay. Okay. So you're waiting to grill me.
But no, I'm very interested. So I don't want to make that sound like I'm not keen to just. I'm just paying attention. So go ahead.
Okay. So a lot of the questions we had a simple scale for, which was not important, somewhat important, modestly important, very important, or essential. And then we ask questions like, how important do you perceive supervision to be? And please rate the importance of supervision for certain characteristics. So, and then we listed the characteristics. So obviously, for example, the question, please rate the importance of supervision for technical, and you could answer not important, somewhat important, modestly important, very important, or essential. And then we had the same for effort, for program design, motivation, accountability, and safety. We then also had a list of physiological adaptations, things like strength, like body composition or fat loss, improvements in muscle mass, vertical jump, resting heart rate, reducing risk of cardiovascular disease. So we had a whole host of physical and physiological adaptations, whether they were performance, whether they were health related. And then we had the same for psychological. So again, the same spectrum. So for example, you would read a question, how do you rate the importance of supervision for strength increases? Not important, somewhat important, modestly important, very important, and so forth. Do you typically perform strength training using, and then we listed an array of modalities. So free weights, resistance machines, cables, bands, vipers, medicine balls, whatever it might be. And then rate your perception of the importance of supervision for those resistance types. So for example, somebody who thinks that they predominantly use resistance machines can answer that that's what they use, but then they can also say how important they perceive supervision to be for it, or free weights, or so on and so forth. Okay. And then we had some open text questions where we said things like, do you perceive supervision should differ between males and females? If so, how? Do you perceive supervision should differ based on trainee experience? If so, how? Have you ever been injured performing strength training? Never, occasionally, frequently? If yes, provide details. So we gave people a chance to really kind of give as much detail as they wanted. And gratefully, a lot of people did, which was really beneficial, but was also really time consuming to go through it all. Qualitative data is very time expensive. But it was, really valuable because it gave people a chance to really say what they think. And they did. So that was good. So responses as we get into sort of the survey results, and I guess this is the bit you're interested in. So of our trainees, 125, so about 54% trainees train alone unsupervised, compared to trainers, about 63% trainers train alone unsupervised. And then if we start to move down the spectrum, supervised one-on-one for trainees was about 34%, around 22% for trainers, and then around 6% supervised in a group or trained with a training partner, and around 14% of trainers trained with a training partner. So I guess our take home from that slide, trainers are more likely to train unsupervised compared to trainees. So if you're a trainee, I guess if you're qualified and you work as a trainer, you're more likely to train unsupervised. Trainees appear more likely to have supervision one-on-one. Females appear more likely than males to have supervised strength training. And that's probably linked to their more positive views about training in general. They more often reported it as being important, very important, or essential, irrespective of what the question was. Females just generally gave a much more positive response than males. Yeah, so that was our kind of our generic open first answer questions.
Yeah, love it.
We then asked why might people engage in training unsupervised? They were asked, is it too difficult to schedule? Is it too expensive? Or is it unnecessary because of your experience and or knowledge? And of course, this is one of the things that we felt like most people probably say, I don't need supervision because I've been doing it for 20 years, which, as you saw from the start, was commonplace. 20 years was quite common. And certainly the supervision as unnecessary was by far the most relevant. 64% of trainers and 48% of trainees said that they don't need supervision because of their experience. There were very low responses for difficult to schedule and too expensive. So that's kind of their reason for why they're training unsupervised.
Right.
Perceptions of importance of supervision. So how important do you perceive supervision for strength training? We're starting to group things here now as very important and essential, or not important, somewhat important. So a kind of a predominantly negative response or a predominantly positive response. 78% of trainers said it was important or essential, 53% of trainees. So more trainers said it was more important compared to trainees. And that might be because they know the research, so they know it's more important. That might be their own self-justification in their role. That might be their confidence in what they deliver. Ultimately, I guess, if you are selling yourself as a product, you're going to rate yourself and your product as being of some importance. You're incredibly unlikely as a trainer to say, no, people don't need it. I think that makes perfect sense. And then how important do you perceive supervision to be between males and females? And as I said, females had more positive views. Around 51% of females rated it important or essential, and around 41% of males rated it important or essential. As we start to move on to the characteristics, so technical ranked absolutely the highest. Trainers rated it 90%, or 90% of trainers gave it very important or important, and 82% of trainees gave technical very important or essential. And then motivational was ranked as the lowest. So motivational was enjoyment. And as you said, most people probably ranked that low. So around 65% of trainers said that was important or essential, and around 48% of trainees ranked it as important or essential. And then the other characteristics were split amongst them. So safety ranked high at sort of 80-something%. Accountability ranked high at 77, effort ranked high at 72, and program design at 75. Probably the biggest difference between trainers and trainees was for accountability. So trainers sort of said that around 77% of clients they rated accountability as very important or essential. Whereas only about 53% of trainees rank accountability very important or essential. And safety, again, was the same sort of thing. Trainers said, 80% of trainers said that safety is very important or essential, whereas only 53% of trainees said safety is very important or essential. So that disparity is also really important, because to me, it kind of highlights, well, if trainers are approaching their workout with, oh, they're here because this supervision makes them accountable, and they're here because this supervision gives them safety. Well, it turns out actually they're not. They rank it much less important than the trainer themselves. So that's quite interesting.
So they're far more likely to be there because they want someone to help them provide a greater effort level, and they want to technically understand how to perform the exercise. Those are the main drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. So technique was 82%, and the next one down was effort at 60%. Yeah. So 60% of trainees ranked effort as very important or essential.
And I hear that all the time. Whenever I'm talking to like a new prospect personal trainer, you hear it all the time. It's, I don't know how to do this. I go to a gym and I have no idea what I'm doing. I look like an idiot. Everyone's staring at me. The reality is that no one's really paying that much attention to them because they're paying attention to how people are perceiving them. But yeah, that comes up
Yeah.
all the time for people. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, program design also ranked pretty low. So trainees, around 60% of trainees ranked program design as very important or essential. And program design, arguably the complexity of strength training is one of the reasons why strength training has very low adherence and engagement. And considering the training experience of the people responding in this survey, they even ranked this as, reasonably important. 60% is more than half as ranking it as very important or essential. So even they perceive that program design is important, whether that's load progression or exercise progression or whatever it might be. So that's interesting to see.
One last point on this. It does seem that even though, so just go back one slide. Sorry, James.
Yeah, of course.
Even though percentages, obviously this is ranked in order and motivation, accountability and safety are low, it still seems to me, based on those numbers, that they're all meaningful. Like all 6 of those characteristics are things that people consider to be important for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of them, the only one that didn't rank above 50% for very important or essential was motivation.
Right.
All of those were above 50% with the lower accountability and safety. Well, for trainees, this is 53%. But for trainers, accountability and safety were up in 77 and 80%. But arguably people are saying, oh, these are all important. These are all important characteristics. Right. Now, bear in mind, this doesn't divide it by whether people trained alone, supervised or unsupervised. So we'll kind of move on to that in sort of just a second. But just off the bat, for trainers versus trainees, this was how the split was. So the next slide does ask exactly this. How important do you perceive supervision to be for strength training? And then we've split this by people that train alone, unsupervised, supervised one-on-one, supervised in a group, and training with a training partner. And of course, this was both trainers and trainees now. So this was everybody. And as you would expect, the people that trained supervised one-on-one responded, 57% of them responded essential, 40% responded them very important. For those that trained alone, unsupervised, 0.1% or 0.8%, sorry, ranked it essential and so forth, very low. And the people that trained supervised in a group ranked it, relatively low, 26% essential, 70% very important. So basically, if people had supervision, they ranked it important. If people didn't have supervision, they didn't rank it important. And that probably aligns because if you ranked it important, you would have probably gone out and got supervision. So notably, the one-on-one groups ranked technical very, very highly, 95%. The group ranked technical 92% as very important or essential. Effort was ranked 92% for one-on-one, 92% of respondents who train one-on-one ranked effort very important or essential. A bit lower for group, 77%. Program design ranked very important, both one-on-one and group. So it kind of starts to show now that actually, even on the previous slide, program design was much lower. Now we look at just now we look at by training kind of group, by training modality, whether that's one-on-one or unsupervised. We can see the program design is more important. Motivational, a bit lower still at 81%. Accountability at 83 and safety at 82. So we can see the one-on-one. If you're looking at you on YouTube, then you can see the groups in red, or the values in red are all the one-on-one trainees, ranking those values as very important or essential. And if you're listening, then basically the people that trained one-on-one supervised in order of importance ranked very important and essential, technical at 95%, effort 92, program design 91, accountability 84, safety 83, and motivational 81. So it still stands true that motivational was one of the lowest there.
Yeah.
60% of trainees who strength train with a training partner responded not important or somewhat important. So basically, if you're a trainee who trains with a training partner, you don't rate supervision as very important. So this was interesting because to me, they're kind of saying that the training partner is not supervision; it's just the training partner. So we'll kind of get into that in a minute as well. We presented the data on resistance types, but it's probably what you'd expect. Predominantly free weights were used most by trainers and trainees. Then there was resistance machines and body weight. Resistance machines ranked higher for trainees, body weight ranked higher for trainers. And then there were cable machines and then resistance bands. So it's pretty much what you'd expect. If we look at importance based on each of those resistance types, we see free weights rank the highest. 85% of trainers said supervision was very important or essential for training with free weights. 66% of trainees said supervision was very important or essential for training with free weights. And then the lowest value was resistance bands. 37% of trainers said it was very important or essential, and 20% of trainees said supervision was very important or essential when training with resistance bands. So they were, aside from free weights, they were all relatively low. And in fact, arguably, there's a bit of a funny presentation of the data here. We asked whether people use manually applied resistance, which was used very infrequently. But we also asked how important they perceive supervision to be for manually applied resistance. And to me, supervision is essential for manually applied resistance because that's exactly what it is. And yet only 60% trainers said it was very important or essential, and only 58% of trainees said it was very important or essential.
Hang on. Okay, so you said, was it as explicit in the question, example, resistance applied by a trainer or training partner? Because you can obviously you could do, press the side of your head and do like a lateral flexion with the neck. You can apply resistance to yourself in some exercises, right?
Yeah, totally agree. It was presented exactly as it's shown on the screen there. Manually applied resistance, e.g. resistance applied by a trainer/training partner. So it was pretty explicit, but arguably people might have interpreted it that way and said, well, I do, neck exercises by manually applying resistance.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So it's completely fair that people might have thought something else. I do tend to think that's probably been misunderstood as a question, maybe poor statement around the question. And maybe because manually applied resistance is just not often used, most people weren't really clear on what it was. I mean, this survey was open to everybody. It wasn't just the high intensity training community. There were a lot of S&C coaches and athletes and other people who responded to this.
Do you think that's one potential weakness of this survey was the participant? I mean, I know it was almost 500, but I would have liked to see like 1,000. Is that hard to get that many? Should put on my email list.
No, I mean, the problem was we didn't target anything like your email list because we'd have ended up with a lot of high intensity training.
That's true. Yeah.
And we didn't want to bias it in that way. And we also had the co-authors or the co-researchers share it on their social media. So, for example, Brad Schofield and Eric Helms aren't necessarily HIIT enthusiasts. So the people that they shared it with probably wouldn't have been HIIT practitioners. And we would have loved a larger sample. Arguably the larger the sample, the better the data, the more reliable the data. It was a long survey. I had a few colleagues come back to me who said, "Hey, I've done the survey and I'll share it, but this takes a while."
Yeah, I think I did it. It took a long time,
It did take a long time.
but it's
It did take a long
important though.
time.
Yeah.
And such is the nature of this kind of initial survey. It's very broad. It has reasonable depth. It does have a time commitment to it. Future surveys can now be more focused, whether we focus on new trainers or new trainees, or specifically on one characteristic of supervision or resistance type, whatever it might be. So moving on, we've said this is getting into some of the qualitative data. Do you perceive supervision should differ between males and females? And if so, how? 78% of trainees said no, it shouldn't differ. 84% of trainers said no, it shouldn't differ. So dominantly, no, it shouldn't differ between males and females. But for those that said it did, that we also asked them why, and they could. And then what we did is we went through their qualitative response and we grouped it based on the characteristic. So, for example, a lot of people said that the program should differ for females based on males, basically the selection of exercises or the weight used or whatever it might be. So that was obviously program design. Some people said that men train harder. So that was effort.
That's so not true.
Said that women train harder. So that was effort.
Yeah.
Some people said they have to give more technical coaching to males, or they have to reiterate technical coaching to males, whereas females kind of can follow instructions.
I love this.
If I'm honest, males took a hit in this survey.
We have to be careful not to be politically incorrect here, don't we?
Well, males just didn't come across very well. We very much came across as the group of people who think we probably need more instruction.
Yeah, fair enough.
From a trainer's perspective, it's pretty similar. Program design ranked high, motivation also ranked high, and we also gave them the chance to give any other comments. And trainers gave an additional comment, which we've listed there as other, and around 16% of trainers said that they have to be more careful with personal space between males and females, and with females they are less hands-on, etc. So obviously there were some direct quotes around that, but fundamentally I think that's a fair comment. That you don't want to make anybody nervous or put yourself at risk of any legal implications or any accusations or anything. So probably male trainers dominantly responded that they give females greater thought around personal space. So do you perceive supervision should differ based on age, e.g. children, adolescents, adults, older adults, etc.? In this case, it was dominantly a yes. So around 64% of trainees said yes, about 56% of trainers said yes. So not such a big swing for trainers. If we look down them again for trainees, 30% of people said that technical, or 30% of people that said yes, it should differ, said it should differ on the technical element. 32% said it should differ on safety. And that's probably fair. They're probably thinking that children and older adults need more supervision around safety of what they're doing. And that was probably what came across if I went back through the qualitative data, that would be why I've listed it under safety. They probably listed those age groups. But trainers, it was around 20% program design and around 34% other. And they listed this as level of communication or level and communication. So level of supervision and communication. So this was something that we just found incredibly difficult to group as either technical, program design, effort, safety, and so forth. So of the 56% of trainers that said yes, supervision should differ based on age group, 34% said it should differ based on level of supervision. Now, some people clarified that younger children or older adults should have more supervision, but they didn't say what type of supervision. They didn't say more technical coaching or more motivation or a greater focus on safety. They just simply said more supervision or a greater level of supervision. And then within that same remit, the other comments were greater communication. So it didn't clarify whether that was communication of technical elements, greater communication of efforts or motivation.
Likely to be something around safety and technical, probably, isn't it?
If they listed the characteristic, then it would have got listed under the characteristic. It would have been listed as technical effort, safety, motivation, etc.
Right.
So they simply, 34% of people who said yes, it should differ, simply said yes, the level of supervision should differ. So that in itself is an entire can of worms that we can't unpack that because we don't have the details of it. We don't have the details of what people meant by it. They simply said more supervision for younger people. Right. They didn't clarify what they meant. So that would be interesting. And then the final qualitative question was, do you perceive supervision should differ based on trainee experience? And this was maybe what other people were getting to in the previous question when we talked about age, that they were already thinking ahead to experience. So this was very similar both for trainees and trainers. Around 67 to 70% of people said yes, it should differ. And then there was a difference in the focus. So 32% of people said, 32% of trainees said the technical coaching should differ. 17% of trainees said the program design should differ. 32% of trainees said other and listed level of supervision again. And then similar results for trainers, a bit more spread out, 12% technical, 12% program design. 10% of trainers who said yes, supervision should differ based on experience said that the effort level should differ. So they simply implied that less advanced trainees should have more focus on effort or so forth. And then again, the other part listed level and communication. So of the 70% of trainers who said yes, supervision should differ, 44% of them detailed the level of supervision and or communication. And then for those watching, you can see in red at the bottom of the screen, I've kind of clarified some of that detail. But for those listening, a majority of comments amounted to more supervision for less experienced trainees. So again, there's no focus whether that was more technical or more motivational supervision, simply more supervision. Some comments from trainers suggested they needed to unteach bad habits to experienced trainees. So that was quite interesting. Some people said that, yeah, it should differ and more experienced trainees need more supervision because they've got into bad habits. And less experienced trainees needed more technical supervision. More experienced trainees needed more supervision of effort and program design in general. So, there's a bit of data there. Again, we can only unpack it as far as the values we've got. We can't know necessarily what people meant, although in some cases we had a quote. It didn't give a lot more detail than we've provided there. And then we're starting to get towards the end of the slides here. You might be pleased to hear. Have you ever been injured? So never. Supervised 101, supervised group, training with a training partner, and then same for trainer. Surprisingly or unsurprisingly, those that train supervised 101, most people who train supervised 101 have never been injured. So around 71% for both trainers and trainees. Occasionally was highest for both alone, for both trainees and trainers. And then the one that really surprised me, the highest for trainees was with a training partner.
Wow. Yeah. Go figure.
Right. So in my head, I was totally blown away by this. I was like, how do people who have a training partner get injured? Surely having a training partner, should prevent injury because they have a degree of supervision or rotation or somebody spotting for them and so forth. I had a really interesting dialogue with James Steele about this. He sort of said, no way, man. When you train with a training partner, it's all ego.
Yeah. And they don't have a bloody clue what they're doing either, right? So
Right. So yeah. Absolutely partner as well. We did actually ask what experience the training partner had. And of course, for the trainers, their training partner was mostly qualified. but the trainees, their training partner was mostly not qualified. So, yeah, 80% of trainees who train with a training partner have been injured.
That was trainers, isn't it? It's trainers is
No,
80%.
no, that's trainees. So for trainees, it's to here, yeah. And then
Oh, sorry.
40, yeah. So for 80% of trainees that train with a training partner have been injured. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and then we have some great quotes around this. So this is the qualitative data around that. Most people said it was mostly their shoulders or their low back, and that's pretty consistent in the literature as being the most common parts to get injured. After that, it was things like chest, knee, biceps, which are also the next most common parts that we tend to injure from strength training. And probably the most common reason for injury was improper form or technique. And then I've got some of the quotes on the screen.
Don't need to read all those, James, if you don't want to.
Yeah. But predominantly, they said things like poor form or whatever it might be, you know. So, yeah. And then, so as a bit of a summary, females appear to rate supervision in strength training more important than males, but then they generally give higher values anyway across all variables. Technical coaching appeared to be the most important characteristic of supervision, and this is probably fair, justified based on injury prevalence and maybe comments around resistance types. So most people used free weights, and free weights might require more technical coaching because it's kind of a multi-planar movement, or we can at least move in multiple planes, whereas a resistance machine mostly limits our freedom of movement. Trainers and trainees engaging in supervised strength training reported lower injury rates compared to those being unsupervised or the training partner. And there's a disparity between perceptions of importance between trainers and trainees. And persons engaging in resistance training with the training partner reported the lowest values for importance of supervision, which might indicate they perceive a training partner different to a supervisor.
Just going back, James, I just want to go through some of those points, if that's okay. Just quickly. So just tell me if I'm accurate with this. So obviously the first point, females appear to rate supervision and strength training more important than males. I thought this was quite interesting because this kind of aligns, I guess, what we see in the personal training industry, that typically women seem to be more interested in personal training services, and they seem to be, generally speaking, maybe more motivated. Obviously, this survey suggests that that supports this, right? That they felt that a lot of that variables and characteristics of supervised training are really important, and that seems to play out in our business quite commonly. So, is that kind of what we're seeing here as well?
Yeah, I mean, arguably, you can see this two ways. One is probably females tend to rate it most important, and they tended to rate supervision more important for technical, for motivation, for accountability, so on and so forth. This might be because females generally perceive themselves not to have the knowledge or experience, and therefore they rate supervision higher. It might be because females are just more open to the fact that, hey, if I want my car fixed, I take it to a mechanic. If I want to go to a gym, I go see a personal trainer. Whereas males might be more, well, if I need my car fixed, I'm going to get out the wrench there. And if I need to lift weights, then I'm just going to go to the gym. So maybe males are just less open to kind of guidance. It's the old adage, right? Men never stop and ask directions. So maybe men are just less open to coaching and supervision anyway. No,
go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
I was just going to say the other approach to this is if you're opening a facility or if you run a facility, maybe you want to target females because females seem to be the ones that you're more likely to be able to get to come in and stay with you because they're more open to supervised strength training.
Yeah, that aligns very well with not only our own business, but also a lot of the listeners to this podcast. The next one about technical coaching appeared to be the most important characteristic of supervision. And this, sorry, just to clarify this is the respondents from the trainees as well felt that technical coaching was the most important element, right? Most important characteristic.
Yeah, so males and females, trainers and trainees, alone, unsupervised, supervised one-on-one, supervised group, it didn't matter who you were, they all rated technical as being the most important characteristic of supervision.
So this was really reaffirming as well, because obviously we derived a lot of the way we deliver personal training from, obviously talking to the guys at Discover Strength, who really taught us how to do this. And the thing is, we focus on our specific corrective feedback, right? Which is all about form and technical performance. And then also true specific positive, right? Reinforcing a positive habit or behavior that a trainee is doing. So they keep doing it, and they do it more likely to do it at muscle failure. So if you're trying to get them to keep their shoulders down on like the MedX chest press, for example, if they do it and you say, hey, great job keeping your shoulders down, they're more likely to then continue that behavior. So that's, this is great, because it's kind of supporting the fact that the lion's share of our supervision focus from personal trainers is focused on the most important characteristic as perceived by the trainee.
Yeah, totally. And interestingly, I tend to think that technique to me goes hand in hand with effort, because if you don't have the right technique, you're not applying effort to the right muscle group. But that's probably a higher level thinking compared to maybe the people that responded in this survey, or some of the people that responded in this survey. I'm not trying to do a disservice to the people who did the survey. For me, technique is linked very closely to effort. I can't tell you why people rank technique most important. I can just tell you that they did. We've linked it there to injury prevalence. Most people said that they've been injured and it was a product of poor technique. And most people also said they use free weights, and they said that technical coaching is important for free weights. So I can't, you might be absolutely right. I think it aligns very well with high intensity training philosophy of good technique. But I can only tell you what the data says.
Yeah. All right. Great. All right. Well, those are my only comments on that, James. So if you want to go to the next slide, we can focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So my kind of next slide was, what does all this mean? So, is it important, or is it useful information from a marketing perspective? So as I said, a lot of people do perceive, or a lot of people that currently don't engage in strength training or have low adherence to strength training, argue that one of the most common reasons given is the perceived complexity. So if somebody is there giving them coaching, then that aligns with the technical element. So there might be elements of the fact that it's supervised is a key part of the marketing. Might also be that you market towards females, as we sort of said. There may be other data in there that people can look at and say, hey, don't train with a training partner, train with us. You're less likely to get injured. I totally agree. So the data's there.
Even though safety wasn't ranked as high as some of the other things that people valued from their training. So that's why, we have safe as one of our 3 uniques. So one of our 3 uniques is safe. We use a slow speed of movement and exercises that are congruent with muscle and joint function, right? But I'm starting to think, is that actually less valued based on the perception, or am I incorrect?
Well, based on this data, safety didn't rank as very important by trainers or trainees. It ranked high by trainers, but certainly much lower by trainees. But I guess it's how you interpret safety, right?
Right.
Arguably, technical coaching is improving the safety.
Right.
You're preventing the risk of injury for others. Everybody that said they got injured said it was because of their technique. They didn't say it was because of safety. Well, so I guess the next thing is, does safety lean towards, we do safe exercises, e.g. resistance machines compared to free weights? Does safe mean we, you have a spotter, and so forth? So, safety is probably not the sexy side of strength training, right? So,
right.
I don't know. I don't run a business. I'm at the luxury end of this to say, I don't run a business. I don't have to market a business. So I just present the data and people can use it as they want. my next point, as you can see on the slide there, is where is your emphasis in supervision? So I don't think there's anything wrong with having an emphasis on safety. I'd say to all of my students, all of the trainers and strength coaches, athletes, and national governing bodies that I work with, that the key focus of strength training is not about physical or physiological enhancement. It's about preventing anything getting any worse. So, you know, we look at aging, for example, and it's easy to say, well, I'm 45 this year, Lawrence. So it's incredibly likely I'm going to get stronger. Yeah. But if I have a trainer, what I don't want them to do is injure me. That's the absolute last thing I want them to do. What I want them to do is help me to hang on to every ounce of strength and muscle mass that I've got. You know, an athlete that goes to a strength and conditioning coach, for me, the emphasis is not on improving performance, because it's incredibly unlikely that an elite NFL player or basketball player or, you know, Olympic rower or anything like that is going to get an extra 1% strength or power output, whatever it might be. It's far more important that they are resilient to injury. So safety as an emphasis on supervision, or as an emphasis on supervised strength training, is completely realistic. It just depends whether that aligns with what the clients perceive or want, I should say. And then my final comment on the slide there was, are you meeting your clients where they're at, e.g. with similar expectations of supervision? And that, of course, links back to what we've just said. You know, a lot of clients might come in, they might not be clear on what they're meant to do. They might have, perceive it to be very complex. Are we able to meet them at the level they're at and say, hey, none of that makes a difference. The most important things are this and this. Or if a client comes in and says, hey, my effort is already good. What I need is this. You know, for example, if I walk into, Discover Strength, or I do a virtual, or I walk into, your facility, you know, I've got a long training experience. So my program design is, I'm not interested in what you can give me as far as program design. What I'm probably more interested in is, tell me when my technique breaks down and correct it. Yeah.
Yeah.
My effort might already be high. You might apply advanced overload techniques or whatever it might be, and you might motivate and encourage the effort. But probably the primary thing for me might be technical. So for me, one of the reasons why technical probably ranks so high is because it covers the entire spectrum of trainee experience. If you're new to this, you probably need more technical coaching. If you're very, very experienced, you probably know that it's technique that falters when your effort level gets high. So you know that that's where you need that coaching. So
got it. Yeah. Awesome, James. Thank you so much. We're probably run over time here. So is that the end of the presentation there?
That is the end of the presentation. There's no more to present. There is a little bit more in the paper itself when it will be published. It's been in review, and it will go back into review to be published in a peer-reviewed journal at some point this year. So yeah, I'll, as soon as it's available, I'll let you know, Lawrence, and then you can share.
Yeah, we'll link it. We'll share it. We'll link it up in the show notes. James, thank you so much. I did find that massively interesting. The only reason I wasn't interrupting you throughout is because we're already gone over time, and this is what happens when you and I jump on a podcast together. So very quickly, James, best way for people to find out more about you.
Yeah, I'm on all the usual social media platforms, at JP Fisher UK. I don't use Instagram or Twitter a lot, so if you find me on there, then well done, and don't be surprised if you see much happen. If you have a question, please feel free to email me, james.fisher@solent.ac.uk. I will always reply to emails at my earliest convenience. So yeah, feel free to get in touch.
Thank you, James. And for everyone listening, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube as well. It really helps the podcast grow and help more people. And again, get more clients for your high-intensity training business when you download our free anti-aging and strength training sales presentation over at highintensitybusiness.com/free. And to find a blog post for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com, search episode 412. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.